Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Northwood Podcast. I'm your host, Heath Jones, and I pastor a church in Indianapolis, Indiana called Northwood Christian Church, hence the name of our podcast. And if you'd like to learn more about us, please feel free to visit our website at www.indYncc.org. That's indncc.org, and there you'll be able to find times for our services and other ministry opportunities and statements about our values and the like. And so we encourage you to check that out. Or if you would like to reach out to us more directly, just write in to me at my email, which is heath@indncc.org. That's HEATH at INDYNCC.org. Before we push on, I'd like to give a shout out to the All Indiana Podcast Network for producing this podcast. They produced the Northwood Podcast, along with dozens of others, also recorded and produced in Indiana and often about topics of interest to Hoosiers, though not always that specific. Either way, you should check them out to find out what else might interest you. You can do so by going to www.wishtv.com/podcasts. That's wishtv.com/podcast, and you'll be able to find all of the different podcasts produced by the All Indiana Podcast Network. Here in a moment, we'll be considering a parable of Jesus found in Matthew chapter 20. But first, I'd like to let you know about something that we've got coming up here at our church at Northwood. It's a Bible study called Revelation, End of the World or Cause for Hope. So a little bit of background. It's a Bible study about the book of Revelation. And I've spent much of my life either fearing or outright disliking this book. And it wasn't until much more recently that I learned that many of the approaches and interpretations I had been given for this book were misguided or just straight up incorrect. And it wasn't until I was in seminary that I learned that this book, Revelation, is not a book that calls for our demise or portends a bleak future, but is instead a critique of evil and a call to hope. A call to, in fact, a radical hope and a new future for us. So I'd like to help others work through this book as well. A lot of damage has been done by way of this book, and I know there's a lot of wounds, and so I'd like to help people work through that and help maybe others along a similar journey to the one I've walked on. And so the first lesson will be Wednesday, October the 4th at 7 p.m. That's Wednesday, October the 4th at 7 p.m. And you can attend in person, virtually, or you can catch a recording after the fact. And it's free. So if this sounds interesting to you and you'd like to take this journey along with us, there are a couple of things you could do. You could come in person, if you live in Indianapolis or are nearby, to our physical location at 4550 Central Avenue, Indianapolis, Indiana, zip code 46205. Or you can write in to ask to be put on our emailing list, and that way you'll receive announcements leading up to the study, but also links to the study so that you can watch virtually if you prefer that way. And also, I'll be posting recordings of the lessons on my YouTube page. And the best way for you to find that is, well, if you're watching this, you're already there. But if you're listening by way of podcast, the best way for you to find that YouTube page is to type in my YouTube handle when you open the app or go to the website, which is at HeathJones7. That's sign at HeathJones, altogether 7. Now, moving on to our episode proper. As I was saying before, today we'll be going over a parable found in Matthew chapter 20. But first, we need to pause for an ad break for our podcast audience. And so we'll find you after this short break. And we're back. And today, as I was saying, we'll be considering a parable of Jesus as recorded in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 20, verses 1 through 16. That's Matthew chapter 20, verses 1 through 16. And let's dive right in. It reads, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. When he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And he said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right.' So they went. Then he went out again about noon, and about 3 o'clock he did the same. And about 5 o'clock, he went out and found others standing around. And he said to them, "Why are you standing here idle all day?" They said to him, "Because no one has hired us." He said to them, "You also go into the vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, "Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first." When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, "These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat." But he replied to one of them, "Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous?" So the last will be first, and the first will be last. I can remember some of the first impressions that was made to me as a child about what it would be like to be an adult. And I was looking forward to this, quite frankly. I think most kids are. My kids look forward to growing up, and then you grow up and you wish you could be young again. But when you're a kid, you look forward to being an adult for all of the benefits, like choosing what you want to watch on TV. That sounded pretty nice from the perspective of a 10-year-old. And at 10, it would seem that adulthood was ages away. But I was still aware that in just 6 years I would be able to drive. And then that would be the beginning of freedom, but also the beginning of the end of childhood. And what would that bring? I am reminded of an impression I developed about adulthood around this age, around the age of 10, one that still sticks with me. Here's an idea I learned as a child from the adults around me, and it's this. The idea is, if I don't do something with my life, I felt at the age of 10, or I was told straight up, if I don't do something with my life, I was told, then I will have been a failure. And let me rephrase that. How will you make money when you grow up, kid? That's basically what it felt like it was being asked of me. And of course, the question is never framed so crassly. Instead, you're asked something as a kid like, "Class, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up?" You raise your hand, and then all the kids name different vocations. And I wanted to be a pilot. There's something about flying that appealed to me, still does. But other classmates would name other vocations, rock star, dolphin trainer. Kids are made to think about these things because a time is coming, and the adults know it, when the children will be required to do something with their lives. And I have no problem with this, per se. I have no problem with adults motivating children to think about their futures and how they might use their gifts, both innate and nurtured, to make this world a better place. But you know how it goes. We grow up. And some of us live into our childhood dreams. It's rare, but some do. Some live into their childhood dreams and then discover that this is not what they ever wanted. That's true also sometimes. And some find that maybe they don't live into their dream and they have to let that dream die early so that they can accommodate reality once reality hits, once they grow up. Bills to pay, the need to make ends meet, and so many strive simply to find a place in our economy and in our systems. Any place that will sustain them. Because not to find a place in our economy fills many of us with a nearly existential dread. How if I will not make it? How if I lose my job? How if I end up destitute and homeless? What then? Then we may feel as though we failed. Is that how we see the poor? The poor people around us as failures? And before you leap to defend our culture's opinion of it's poor, think for a moment. Here's the reality. In our culture, we have an ingrained sense in us, an innate sense, that if someone is materially not well off, then this must say something about them, maybe about their skill set, their resilience, their choices, or even something about their moral character. And you think I'm exaggerating? I'm not. There have been entire Christian doctrines shaped around assumptions about the poor, that those who are poor have somehow failed the human race. That this is what God is doing to them, maybe as some form of punishment, or maybe they were getting their comeuppance. And what makes this hard is that we were told in so many ways that our identities as human beings would be all wrapped up in our vocations when we got older. Think about it. You're at a social gathering. Someone asks you your name. Well, hello, nice to meet you. What is your name? And then they ask, what do you do for a living? These days, this question is something akin to our asking, just who are you anyway? What do you do translates, who are you? And this is not a new problem. In Jesus' day, his society had also divided itself up into classes, into haves and have-nots. And those who had made off well in the economy of the day felt as though they were especially favored by God, and they were looked up to in their communities. Or if not by God, by a culture that held up economic success and important titles as signs of virtue. Conversely, they thought that people who were poor, ill, or otherwise unable to participate in the economy had been cursed by God. Or if not cursed by God, by a culture that judged them in their poverty and in their despair. Into this mess, Jesus tells us a parable, a story. It's a parable that places us in the midst of a work site, familiar terrain. It is a story about people on the job and what they discover at the end of the day. So I'll try and retell the story from a more modern perspective. Perhaps a good way to envision what is happening here is to draw a comparison between this story and the situation many American workers found themselves in during the Great Depression. So let's reframe this. Millions of people out of work, and no way to provide for themselves or their families. So imagine in that context that every morning upon waking, you make your way down to the docks or some city corner where you know that some employer will be selecting amongst the best and the brightest, the strongest, and the hardest working to toil all day until sundown probably for the sake of, in those days during the Great Depression, just enough money to put maybe some food on the table that evening. And here in our parable today, we have a similar situation. We have poor day laborers standing around waiting to be chosen. So imagine you get out of bed at the crack of dawn, and the cold morning air causes you to hold your arms close to your chest while you shift your weight from foot to foot as you find your way to that line, and then stand there waiting for your turn, waiting for the employer to show up, and then sort through folks to figure out who will get paid, who will eat that day. So imagine you're standing next to other people, hoping beyond hope that today you will be chosen. You want to work. You do. You aren't standing idle because you chose to be there. Biblical scholar writes of this parable. Biblical scholar Barbara Reed writes of this parable, quote, "They are not there because of a lack of willingness to work, but rather because no one has hired them." End quote. So you similarly, perhaps you were passed by because you were not like some of the others with their competencies. Maybe you aren't as strong, or perhaps you have some disease that prevents you from being as productive as some others. Or perhaps you are older and beyond your prime years, and maybe you've lost a skip to your step, and the owner prefers the younger, more energetic workers. Either way, you are passed by, and then you begin to wonder where your next meal will come. How will you go back to your family and break the news that you didn't find work this day? But then, to your utter joy and confusion, 3 hours later, around 9 o'clock, the owner comes back looking for more workers. And this is not typical, but you aren't about to question the circumstance. Beggars can't be choosers. You'll take what you can get. And this time, the the owner of the vineyard or the work site of the stockyards or wherever it is, he stops in front of you and asks if you'd like to make a buck or two. And your excitement makes it difficult to stammer out a yes. And so you go and join the other workers. Now, true, they have been working longer. And they have seniority, probably, but at least you're here. 3 hours later, and around noon, the owner returns with a new batch of workers. And this is even stranger. And you wonder why the owner didn't just hire all the workers outright from the get-go. But either way, beggars literally can't be choosers. So you continue in your labor. 3 o'clock in the afternoon rolls around, and maybe you're taking a water break and you notice that the owner returns with still more workers. So this is getting to be a bit too much, you're thinking. And yet, again, so long as you are paid at the end, you're not going to ask questions. The text reads that the owner goes back to the marketplace one more time towards the end of the day. What's the point, right? Around 5 o'clock in the evening. It's about time to call it a day. And yet he goes and asks the ones standing around, the ones who are left behind, why are you standing here idle all day? That's what he asks. Then the response in the text could break your heart. It should. Because they say, no one has hired us. We have not been selected. No one has chosen us, in other words. I have been passed by again and again, day after day, and that day quite literally 4 or 5 times. No one had determined that they were worth their while. No one had determined that they might be an asset to them. But the owner of this vineyard says, even an hour or two before quitting time, you also go into the vineyard. I accept you. I accept you. So, they go. And then you, imagine you're still there, put yourself back there, and you see that more workers are added to the throng, and you think to yourself, I've been working since 9, so I hope to receive at least enough to buy some bread for my wife and my kids. But I can imagine what these latecomers hope to gain. They haven't even worked enough for a cracker. What's the point? But then comes the time to receive payment. The first goes forward. The first group came in before you, and they receive a fair full day's pay. And then your group comes up, and you expect a little less. After all, you haven't been at it as long as that first group, but to your surprise, you're paid exactly as much as the first group. Not very fair, you think, but you're not going to ask questions. The first group grumbles a bit, but you reason that, while the first group worked longer, you worked harder. So at least it seems to you that maybe this is fair. But then the next group, the group that began at midday, goes forward to receive their pay. And to your mild, maybe medium amount of annoyance, they receive the same as you? You turn to another person in your group and say, now that hardly seems fair. The next group, the group who have been working maybe a half an hour as long as you, goes forward. And they receive as much as you. Those ones who came at the end of the day. And now that money in your own pocket seems to be depreciating with each passing minute. And the last group comes forward, the castaways. Those that barely made it at the end of the day. The cripples, the diseased, the elderly, the weak, and the broken. And you watch them work, hobble around, do their best at the very end. And perhaps, they felt rested, from all that standing around. You're thinking to yourself, as they had done the day before, and then the day before that. But even so, they could hardly carry the baskets in which the harvest was put in. And so you're thinking, what could they possibly get paid? They could hardly swing a hoe. And you can hardly believe that the owner has the gall to pay them what you were paid. Now, it was quite all right when you were paid as much as the group that came before you. But this, maybe you'd have done much better to just wait until the last minute yourself. And this rationale, what I'm describing here, let's step away from this story for a moment. This rationale makes sense to us because, we've been trained, you and I, to think about our relationships as transactional. We've been trained by our culture to feel as though we are in competition with others in the vineyards, the workplaces of life. But remember, this is a parable about the realm of God, not the world as it is, but the world as it could be. And things are different here in the realm of God. The worker who came late to the vineyard did so because he'd been passed over again and again by a cruel world. So you can imagine what the worker had to do in the meantime to survive. Perhaps stealing to make ends meet. Maybe they would leave that line at the end of the day and then go find something to steal on the way home. But it's a lifetime of hardship and separation from community. And this is transformed when the owner of the vineyard says, in so many words, "You are accepted. I choose you. Welcome to my embrace and my love." The worker then goes to the vineyard and is blessed by the owner, the same as anyone else. Here is the point. No matter where you come from or how long it takes you to accept God's love of you, you are, in the end, embraced as if you had been there all along. This is God's love. It turns out that at the end of life's labor, what matters is not so much what you do in life, your accolades, your accomplishments. No. What matters is not so much what you do. What matters is who you are. And who are you? You are God's child, made in God's image, full stop. This is a far cry from our modern systems of meritocracy, where we value others primarily because of their abilities and accomplishments. If someone can produce, put in the time in the vineyard, then they are worthwhile. If someone's efforts can be commodified, then they are someone, especially if they can be commodified in a large way to a large sum of money. If they can show up early and put in the work in climbing this economic ladder, then they will eventually arrive. In the realm of God, the assumption will not be what I'm describing here. It will not be those who've worked hard enough to have earned the right to live can be here. Instead, in the realm of God, it is assumed that everyone has the right to live and to live well, regardless. We were not made, primarily, to produce consumer products. That's an assumption Jesus makes. It's what I believe. We are not here to earn our way in this economy so that then we'll know our worth. Our status is not determined by our abilities to accrue more material wealth or by our titles and distinctions. Thus saith the Lord. At least this is what Jesus wants us to know. And in the parable of the workers in the vineyard, what we find at first is a community that felt that it was in competition with itself for resources. And this is very similar to our economy. I mean, just look outside. This is the way that our world works. In competition for resources, job opportunities, where we sense that we are in competition over and against other moneyed interest. In our economy, we have these clear winners and losers. Consequently, the alleged winners hoard resources and defend private property on pain of death. But in the world Jesus envisions for us, those who our culture thinks of as less than will be found to be just as important as any who hold high office or title, regardless of the size of their bank accounts. We will not be defined by our assets and holdings. Our identity will be found in our relationships with God and with others. So in the realm of God, the CEO of a modern company may meet someone beholden to soup kitchens for sustenance to discover that, by God's metric, they are each on an equal plane. In the realm of God, a prime minister or president can commune with a field laborer to discover that they are brothers and sisters, that the titles that separate them are humanity's contrivance, not God's, our idea and our delusion, not God's. But our current reality does not reflect this, does it? As I've described our modern situation, the stark differences between Jesus' perspective and those that drive our culture's economy, well, couldn't be more obvious that our perspective is different than Jesus's or the one laid out in this parable. Jesus' way is wisdom, so what's needed is a moral revival in our times, a spirit of the age that may roll across our culture, changing hearts and minds, converting the greed and violence in our culture to generosity and peace. But don't hold your breath. It's hard to envision such a radical shift in our collective thinking. So Jesus, knowing the problem was huge, decided in his day to start small. He began with 12 disciples who, in time, had their own hearts and minds conformed to the vision Jesus holds for humanity. And then later, the early church would build this movement. In the church, people discovered what today's parable teaches, that all are accepted and equally loved by God. They lived then into this truth, and in small house churches, humble abodes and dwellings, wealthy Roman citizens broke bread with poor Jewish peasants in the name of God and in the name of love. Now, here we are. We cannot control the culture writ large, but we can be a witness to it. We can, in our own communities, discover that though we each come from different backgrounds and contexts, here, we are all equals here. And not only here, because what the world needs to see is that we are equal out there too. Every place. The inequalities are our delusions. The class distinctions, our delusions. We are all equally loved, valued, and cared for. We are equal in every place and in the eyes of God, which is to say, on the most fundamental and truest levels. So when we break bread at church around our communion tables, what we're doing is inviting all to the table, each to receive the same portion. In this moment, it's a teaching moment. It teaches us the deep truth that once you strip all of this away, the material possessions, the important titles that we surround ourselves with, when you strip all of that away, we are all children of God, equally loved and valued. So part of the work of the church is to create spaces where the world of today's parable lives out in real time. Our work is to create a place in our churches and in our homes, in our communities, where the values of God's realm are lived into, where those who our culture places last are put first, truly, just like the latecomers in today's story. We are called as Christians to cultivate an environment where we no longer assess one another by our vocations or our titles, but rather by who we are in relationship to God and to one another. And who are we in this truest sense? We are all brothers and sisters, children of God, dearly loved. And I hope that today you can realize your worth and the worth of every other person you will meet along the way. And if you leave this discussion with anything, leave with this truth. In the end, it's not what you do in life so much as who you are in life. And what you do will flow naturally from that, and it will be life-giving, but it's who you are fundamentally that matters. God's child, dearly loved. And while we're at it, so is everyone else you've ever known. Child of God, dearly loved. And everyone else you will ever meet. You will be known yourself and remembered for the love that you share. So love the last and the first and everyone in between, and treat your neighbor as you want to be treated yourself. Jesus told us to do this. And imagine if this advice were followed in every place, how different would our world be? This has been the Northwood Podcast. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe to the podcast by way of whatever app you use to listen, or leave a comment. These points of engagement drive more traffic our way. Or check out our website, www.indyncc.org. And also check out the other podcasts produced by the All Indiana Podcast Network. Until next time, this has been the Northwood Podcast. I am Heath Jones. Peace.